And people can jump in, I suppose. Share screen here.
Before you share your screen, I need to share mine.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem.
You ready, Amy?
Yep. All right. So just want to welcome everyone. We also want to thank Herca Construction, which is our sponsor this month. And just a few house rules for the presentation. If everyone could mute their microphones while Paul's giving his presentation. And if there are any questions as the presentation's going on, you can put them in the chat. There'll actually be a few times that we'll break for a Q&A session. So you can also, at that time, unmute yourself and ask questions then. But just like to introduce Paul Poirier, who's going to be giving us this presentation today. Many of you know Paul, but just as an intro, Paul's a past AIA president, and has over 35 years of experience designing award-winning commercial and residential projects with an emphasis on green innovation and design excellence. And he has provided his leadership to the Central Coast Green Building Council, the Sustainability Project, the Green Building Alliance, the AIA Santa Barbara chapter, and has served as a past chair and current member of the AIA California Committee on the Environment. And recently he's been working with the AIA to roll out the 2030 commitment program to AIA members across the country and through the 2030 work group. Paul's a California Office of Emergency Services certified trainer, and he's actively trained architects and engineers across California to be able to respond to major disasters through Cal OES deployment. So Paul's committed to maintaining architectural beauty of the Central Coast while protecting the environmental quality, resilience, and sustainability of our community. His office is also one of 27 companies in the country that have met the 2030 commitment. So I'll turn it over to you, Paul.
Well, great. I wanted to share this program with you guys. I think it's really cool. I think before this program happened, I was always just pushing the envelope, trying to make the greenest projects possible. And recently, AIA made a commitment, the national organization, to make climate change and addressing it through architecture their top priority. And they could always make hollow commitments like that, but this time AIA leadership was really behind it. So they have a series of programs that come out. They're making a coordinated attempt to educate all the architects in the country and make this part of everyone's practice, not just specialists who specialize in green building, but to really get everyone on the programs. That's the only way we're going to make any difference with climate change. So I'm going to talk about our role with climate as architects, the 2030 commitment, how you do it, what a signatory does, what you get out of it, other Beyond Zero framework and the framework for design excellence, which came out of the AIA Committee on the Environment, the Common App for Design Excellence, which is now standardized and being beta tested for national awards and state of California code awards, as well as AIA California awards. And then other lessons I learned in the field from using all these different tools that are out there. So climate change and the role of an architect. We know that, we're working on buildings and climate change looks like it's happening and our climate's changing. They have below zero temperatures in Texas. We have like insane wildfires in California, and the UN identified this in 2018, that if we get over 1.5 degrees centigrade, we're going to have lots of trouble and it might not be able to swing back. So everybody is saying, we got to get on this thing. The UN says by 2050, Gavin Newsom says by 2030, John Kerry, who I think is part of the new Biden administration addressing climate change, says by 2030 or else. So that's the Paris Climate Accord. So without architects contributing to this, and if we're only following rules put in place by local, state, and federal governments, we're probably not going to make a dent in time fast enough. So the architects said, hey, as an organization, other people have owned this, but AIA is going to own this now. We're going to get our members to learn about this, be the experts on environmentalism and green building, and take back the turf that should be ours, which I think is awesome. So of course, you know, we have stuff like this, Lake Kachuma being where it was at not too long ago, insane thunderstorms here in Santa Barbara, you know, the debris flow 2 years ago. All these things are not normal Santa Barbara weather. And, you know, globally, we're seeing it, you know, from fires in Australia, orange skies in San Francisco and California, flooding in India. You know, it's pretty obvious sign that things are not normal all over the world, and the Amazon as well. So I'm glad to see it's not just the United States that's pushing this thing forward, that through the Paris Climate Accord, a lot of different organizations are trying to work together to come up with solutions, but we need to accelerate innovation and get this stuff put in place ASAP. So building operations are responsible for 30% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And buildings generate 40% of annual greenhouse gas emissions, mostly in urban areas. So a quarter of the emissions from embodied carbon, the carbon emitted over the life cycle of the project, including construction and material manufacturing. And that's an area that the AIA is starting to look into, is how much carbon goes into the materials that are built into the building, as well as how much carbon is generated by the operation and ongoing operation of the building. So design strategies have the greatest impact on building energy use. Architects have the tools to drive down operational carbon through energy efficiency. So when we make a building that uses less energy, it'll use less energy over the course of that building life. So the 2030 challenge was published in 2006. In 2009, the AIA established a 2030 commitment for fringers like me to join and AIA COAT members. But in 2019 in Las Vegas, just 2 years ago, a bunch of us rebels wrote and drafted and were signatories to a resolution that was brought up by the membership to the convention, and the convention voted to make climate change the top priority of the AIA. And so now the AIA had some people who are on the board of directors who took that to heart and really started making programs to promote this on a national level and getting staff behind it and getting money behind it and really making an effort to push this forward. So it's really, really incredible that that has happened. Well, a lot of statistics about climate change. Again, you know, the fight against climate change will play out in our cities and our buildings as we double the current global building stock. So clearly, new buildings need to be built with the type of infrastructure that we want for the future, not the type of infrastructure that we have been using up till now that may not be the most effective and the most efficient for fighting climate change. Half the building stock will be retrofitted. So retrofits are important. Nobody's really looking at legislating much about the retrofit of existing buildings at this point, but clearly as we're working on buildings, we want to start doing what we can to change them from the way that they're working to be way more efficient with lighting technology, HVAC technology, solar technology. All those things are at our fingertips here in California to really make our buildings high performance without much effort. And I won't read the whole quote from Hop Hopkins, the director of strategic partnerships at the Sierra Club. But he says, you can't have climate change without sacrifice zones. You can't have sacrifice zones without disposable people. And you can't have disposable people without racism. Meaning, if we just focus on climate change in the wealthy neighborhoods or the big, expensive, fancy zero net energy homes, and we don't work on energy efficiency for low-income housing or things like that, we're really not going to get where we want to be, and we'll be perpetuating the social justice aspect of architect in terms of healthy places for all income levels, which is what the new goal is. So AIA is embracing that and trying to figure out how to put a metric on it and include it in their design perspectives and to show people how it can be accomplished. So this next section, we're going to talk about what the heck is the 2030 commitment and what's the process of becoming a signatory. So the mission of the commitment is to transform the practice of architecture in a way that's holistic, firm-wide, project-based, and data-driven. So it started in 2010 with shooting for a goal of 60% energy reduction from the average energy use. Now it's 2021, so as we're ramping up to 2030, we're trying to meet 80% reduction in carbon use from the national average. And it's just a goal. Not every one of my projects meets 80% reduction, and I know that. And it just got harder. So in 2019, I did make 70% for the balanced average of my whole portfolio of projects. I don't think I'll make 80%, especially last year, where some of my projects got canceled. But knowing that I have a goal to try to meet that along with other people, and actually measuring how my company portfolio is performing allows me to look at it and go, oh man, we got to try a little bit harder. Or, oh yeah, we're doing pretty good over there on those projects, but these guys are kind of hurting. So without this kind of metric to measure your project performance, you really don't know where you are. And I compare it to using the Thomas Guide to get somewhere. Back in the day, you had the Thomas Guide, and it showed you one page of like the city of Los Angeles if you're trying to find a place. And so you look at the one page, which would maybe be the Title 24 sheet for one of your projects. It's not in any kind of context. Yeah, once you get to that little block, you can figure your way to maneuver around there. You can't really see where you are in relationship to the whole picture of all the projects you did that year or in the last 10 years. So with this, it gives you the ability to look at your projects against other projects you've done and other projects of that building type that have been recorded by other architects that are participating in the program. So it's kind of cool in that if you were doing, say, a church and you never did a church before, or like me, you've only done 2 churches, like I have a whole body of work of 2 churches to measure against for energy performance, which is not much. But I could go and use this tool and look at all the churches that are anonymously input and what their energy performance is and see how I would like to set the goals for my project to be the best one, to be in the top 10%, the top 25%, or at least average, right? Certainly not shooting for anything below 50% in terms of all the projects that are put in there. This is a guy talking about being amazed that his clients, repeat clients, you know, he's a little bit hesitant about talking to them about it because it's an admission that they weren't really doing the best that they could. So here's myths about the 2030 commitment. It does take time to put in the data for your projects into the database, but you do get some value back out of the collective database that's generated. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes to put the data into the DDX, which I'll show you a little later. You basically put in the square footage, the use, the code you're using, 2016 California Energy Code or 2019 California Energy Code or whatever. And it then generates a baseline of what the typical project of that building type should be generating for energy use intensity, also known as EUI. And then you can set your goal and say, well, I know we're going to have some solar, and I know we're going to be kind of green on this project, and I know I'm in California, so we'll shoot a goal of 50% plus renewables and see how it all pans out. You set some early goals and preliminary design, and as you start getting into envelope design, you try to do an integrated design delivery with your mechanical engineer to design the envelope, the mechanical systems with that goal in mind. Then you could size your renewable system if you have solar on the roof to try to get it to be where you want to end up at the end of the day. Again, I do it the lame way. If I were on top of it, I would have people, project managers, putting this data in for 15 minutes as the projects are going out to construction. We do it like taxes. We wait until the deadline and we spend 3 days, three of us, hammering it out, and then we're done. And we just go through all the projects we worked on in the last 12 months, input all the data, get in there, we get the feedback at that one time. It kind of builds a little bit of head of steam of its own in terms of everyone's curious about the data that's going to come out and how we did. We can review it as a team. But I think it would be less of a tax return action if we periodically did it, a few every month as our projects come and trickle through. The program's free, doesn't cost anything. There's a lot of resources available to you. If you do sign up, the data is anonymous, so nobody can see how well or how poorly your firm does, but it's good information for you to have as a firm owner. It helps you know that you're moving the right direction with the projects that you're doing and the way that you're strategizing to get them to perform better. And it's a good project. So the benefits of participating. Of course, you'll be providing some leadership, but you can master your data. I think this is the thing for me as a firm owner that was most important. 2030 commitment signatories are able to track and report basic data through the free and confidential cloud-based tool, the Design Data Exchange, known as the DDX. The tool works with others in your toolbox to help you stay on top of your portfolio performance, identify low performers, and learn from high performers. Use this data to make presentations to staff and clients. So then you can also affirm sustainability values influence 68% of potential employees' choice. And for just over a third, they're a deciding factor. So when you are an expert in sustainability, you're going to get some good employees. Being part of the 2030 commitments, one way to signal your values and set your firm apart. I think more so for large firms. I know large firms that are signatories are always discussing what kind of competitive edge does this give me over other large firms to land that big contract where I'm competing head to head, and we can show that we're a signatory and that, you know, this is how we're able to do in that building sector. For small firms, I think it doesn't have that competitive advantage as much, but the value really comes from, number one, being the master of my data, plus the data all the big firms created that's at my fingertips. That's invaluable for architects that have small firms. I have 6 people at my office, but now I have a database from some of the biggest and best designers doing big green buildings in the country, and I can see how their performance is stacking up against mine. So I think it's great. And then the 2030 commitment signatories are more likely to report winning design awards, and more awards programs adopt the framework for design excellence, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and require performance stats in the awards application. So you're going to be able to build a database that you're going to be able to use to show high energy performance on your application if you're into applying for awards at the state and national level. 7 of the 10 most recent AIA Architecture Firm Award recipients are signatories. Since 2014, every firm to receive a COAT Top 10 award has become a signatory. I like how they wrote that. Some of them were not signatories, and then after they won a COAT award, I think they were shamed into becoming 2030 signatories. In 2018, more than 70% of AIA award-winning projects were designed by one or more 2030 signatory firms. So as sustainability starts having more value within the peer-to-peer award process, I think that these tools are helping these big firms and the leading firms get this information, but it's available to any size firm. So I want to try to get you guys on board with this stuff so that the architects in town can do the best projects we can. And it's not that hard because I've been doing it. So these are the steps you need to take to get through the 2030 commitment. Sign the commitment letter. When you sign up online for the AIA 2030 commitment, they'll give you a template letter. You can just copy that thing, slap it on your letterhead and sign it. You can customize it a little bit. It stays with the record of your firm. It just says, I'm committed to help fight climate change, and I'm going to try to get my firm to, you know, get up to the level that the 2030 commitment says, which is 80% reduction. So that's pretty steep, but it doesn't say you're going to. It says you're going to try to, and you're going to move towards that. And I think that's the important part, It's not compliance. There were only, I think, 27 firms that made it this year, and I was lucky enough to be one of them just because of the composure of the projects I happened to have in 2019. But it's a commitment to try to do your best. You create a sustainability action plan for your office. You try to meet the targets. You report all your projects that you did that year, and then you review and update your sustainability plan. You're supposed to do it every 3 or 5 years. That's something I need to do because mine is still from 2010. So you create an account by going to this login, and you slap the letter on your letterhead, customize it if you feel it's important for people in your firm to maybe add a couple of other things about why you want to do it, just to memorialize that. Send it off to the AIA. Then you have 6 months to do a sustainability action plan. That's really like looking at your office and saying, what can I do around my office to make this office a better place to work and really do our part in terms of what we're doing with the footprint of our office operation. So it talks about your firm's commitment to climate change, your approach, who's going to do the reporting. Is it one person? Is it everybody? You know, what kind of education are you going to support, and how are you going to get people smarter? And what's your operations like? So they have examples online. I'll show you mine from our office in 2010. The white is our goals that we set back then when we all sat around and talked about it. We wanted to upgrade our lighting. We had T12 fluorescent lights in my office. And since then, we've done 2 lighting upgrades. We went to T8s maybe 8 years ago, and we just went to LED, dimmable LEDs, which are awesome. We looked at the equipment that we bought to make sure it was the most energy compliant. Other operational things we did, which are kind of no-brainers now. COVID made us all go to PDF only. We're barely ever running paper these days. And we do have composting at my office, which back when we got it about 8 years ago was quite a feat. Now I think they would probably give anyone composting if they wanted to have it at their office. Usually only given to restaurants, but you can request it if you want to in Santa Barbara. We use all recycled content, office supplies, and even recycled toilet paper. We have secure bike storage in our building. And of course, we're using Zoom and Uber and all the things that are like part of COVID world, as well as not renting a car when you travel for business world. So back in 2010, it was like really out of the ordinary, but a lot of these things are pretty standard. So we need to update our SAP, Sustainability Action Plan, for my office and set some new goals because we've almost accomplished all of them. Then you want to try to get the 80% projected energy use intensity reduction on your projects. And for projects that are TIs only, I do a lot of those. You only use the lighting power density numbers that come from the energy calcs based on lighting. So it's a 25% reduction from the baseline lighting power density. With LEDs and in California, you're going to almost sleepwalk to that one, unless you like having tons of lights everywhere. The deadline's March 31st every year, where you have to input the data from your different projects. So depending on how many projects you run that have applicable data, my office runs about around 35 that have energy data. Other ones are trash enclosures and grease interceptors and stuff like that that I do not put into the DDX. But anything with lighting, interior conditioned space, or new projects, we put them all in and record the square footage and the energy performance. If you're working with another firm, you can share the project and both firms can report that. Update your sustainability action plan. Here they're saying every 3 years, so that's something I need to do. And then what impact are these signatories having? I'll do you a little walkthrough of the DDX in a second. But so these are people who joined before 2019, and these are people who submitted their portfolio. So I think it's pretty hurt how few people actually submit their portfolio. You see 151 small firms joined, but only 36 people in the whole country that are in a small firm submitted their portfolio. 178 medium-ish sized firms submitted, 101 did their portfolio. The big guys are pretty compliant. 130 signed up, 106 sent their paperwork in. So a lot of people, small guys, it can be intimidating if you don't know how to do it, and it can be overwhelming, but it's really pretty simple. So I hope only 36 people submitted. If we can get 10 more people from Santa Barbara will be big on this map. They'll go, wow, we got all these sustainable people in Santa Barbara. It's the epicenter of green building. And it's simple to do. So that's my goal, is to make us and California stand out. When this project is dominated by Californians, they're going to go, what are they doing over there? And we're going to go, we're building zero net energy homes that have renewables on every roof. You know, it'll be. This is the percent reduction that averaged by state, each state has been submitting. So California, basically 60% energy reduction. Further states, but are more stringent, so that gives us a little bit of a start. Every project's modeled, so that means we can take modeling data, we know what we're working with, and we can then push the envelope a little bit more with very little effort. And then worldwide, actually there's 2,602 projects all over the world. A lot of these large firms do stuff globally, so the program is actually running globally. So imagine comparing a project that we're doing in Santa Barbara with one that's done in China where there's no energy code. So of course we're going to have a big head start because we're already going to be 50%. I don't know if that's true anymore with the new code and the new baseline, but we might be 40% above baseline just by complying with Title 24, as opposed to a place that didn't even have an ASHRAE baseline, where you could just do whatever. You could like set a building on fire to heat it if you wanted to, and you know it's probably legal over there. So I think that California is the place that's the most regulated and has the highest standards and maybe the highest aspirations of any state. And Santa Barbara is the mildest climate zone in California. So clearly we should be able to kill this thing and have the highest performing projects. So the impact of people participating, it's just measuring stuff people are doing, but it's equivalent of removing 4.4 million cars from the road for 1 year. But I don't know if people would be doing it that well without the tool, is the point. It's nice to have metrics where we can measure. This is a cool metric that shows the lowest 25%, the second lowest 25%, the 50% mark, the median to 75, 75 to 100 for each building type. I forget what they call this, bar and whiskers, I think. So you could say you're doing a single family residential project that's modeled, and you could decide, here's the 2030 target. You can decide where you'd like your energy reduction to be to see where you're on the map. Say your office is running at 30% better than baseline, and you know you want to be at 70, but maybe that's too much of a stretch for the project. You could say, well, let's push it to 40 and try to get it up to 40 and get a bunch of projects up to 40 or up to 35, so that every year you make a little baby step closer to where everyone's trying to get to. And you'll know, like say this building type, retail, even modeled projects, the highest performing one didn't make it to 70%. So you'd really have to stretch to get there. And so maybe 70% is unrealistic for that building type. But and you wouldn't feel so bad if you were at 60%. You're like, dude, looks like I'm in the top 10% at 60%, rather than feeling bad because you didn't make this 70 or 80% reduction for that building type. Whereas if you did higher ed and you're at 70%, I don't know how to say it, but you're a slacker because you're almost at the 80th percentile for that building type. If you really think you're, throwing everything at it and you're making the challenge at 70. So this is, I think, where the bigger body of data input has value for small firms. Okay, I'm gonna have to really start going faster. Model projects, of course, perform better than non-modeled projects. Lots of savings of money for both commercial and residential projects when they're more energy efficient. That goes without saying. It's easy to make an argument to your clients that energy proficient, high performing schools will save them money in the long run. They get it. You know, this is how our progress has been of the firms participating versus where we're supposed to be on an average. And we're not there yet. So we got to get some other. California was at 60%, which is up here. We're closer, but we're not quite there. So we, in California, are going to make a big push to educate people about this, get our projects better so that we can be pushing up to the 80 line, which is right up here, which we just stepped up to in 2020. Okay, I'm going to show you super quick a demo of what the DDX app looks like by going into my confidential file here. So this is a house we're working on, and we input already all the data about it, where it's at, what the climate zone is, what the square footage is, what code was going to be in effect. This one actually just went on hold. And I'd have to update this in 2019, Title 24, which will affect my baseline, lowering it. But this is the 2030 target it gives me. And this is where my project target was. We weren't quite making it to the 80%, but we were like at 53% at concept design. So I can already start figuring out where my project's going to be on the scale before I'm even at CDs. And we're going to have ground mounted solar to offset some, and I could guesstimate how efficient the envelope would be based on other projects that we've done, and set those things. We run the Title 24 energy model. If we don't hit the target, we're going to crank some more insulation on something or make some adjustments with my energy consultants to get it to where it wants to be so that I can end up having a better performance. And let me show you this other tool. So everyone might be saying, how do you input this EUI? Are you a genius? Do you use Sapphira or one of those programs to generate that stuff? And actually, it got a little cumbersome with the 2013 Title 24. So I emailed, or Tara emailed you guys these calculators. This is a non-residential calculator. There's also a residential calculator. But let me just show you how this works. So this is the project we did for the Forest Service. And it's a two-story building in Solvang. And buried in the data, this one was a 2016 Title 24 project. It just got open last December. There's this table U. Table U in the 2016 has the standard design electric use here in this column, 45.3. The modeled proposed design use, 52.1. So we're actually bad because we're using more electricity than the baseline. So that's looks really bad to me. But the standard design value for gas is 86.9, and we did all electric. So we have 0 because we did not run gas to the building. So we did a fully 0 carbon building by increasing the electric load, right? So my numbers are 52.1 for electric, 0 for gas. So I go over here to this table calculator that's in your kit, and I put the square footage in. I take the 52.1 from this table U, and I take the 0 for gas use from table U, and I put it in the calculator. Boom, boom. It converts it to common units. This used to be brain damage for me. It converts it to a common energy unit. I can just come over here and say, then it says, okay, you're using 19.6 kBTUs per square foot per year. And then I go, yeah, and we're working with Brighton Solar to put a 30,000 kilowatt solar on the roof. And it gets me down to 8.3 is my PEUI, projected energy use intensity. And from this, my baseline EUI, I believe, was this number plus that number, right? Of the gas plus electric. So we're killing it. which is awesome. So I put this into the DDX as my energy use for that project, and then it tells me how good I did, right? So it takes me about, and my employees who are just recent graduates and not too sophisticated on the architecture business or reading Title 24 calculations, they can do this in 15 minutes. So square footage, use, applicable code, teach them how to use the calculator and find the data in table U. There's instructions I emailed you on how to extract that data from the 2013, 2016, and 2019 energy codes for residential and for commercial. So you now have the instructions and the magic tool. I love this tool. Why? Because say my solar guy goes, oh yeah, we could put 30, but you know, how much do you really want to have? And I can go, oh, let's try 35. Oops. Nah, not enough. Try 45. Oh yeah, that's looking really good. So I can size my solar system to get to 0 fairly easily. This all comes with a different cost, right? You can balance the cost of the budget that the client has with the goal of the energy use intensity and the roof area or other ground area you have for your solar system. So instead of having everyone else in control of that stuff, you can now own it as the architect who knows about how this stuff is working, right? Okay, going back. So now that's the DDX, purely about energy use. So then the AIA met with the code, everyone brainstormed, how do we get architects to do buildings that are gonna just make a better world in general? And not just fight climate change, but you know, equity and all these other issues. So they took these things that they used to judge projects for the COTE Top 10 Awards, and they made this thing called the Framework for Design Excellence. They've embraced it. They're gonna try to get everybody educated about this that's a member of the AIA. We're gonna alienate a lot of people who could care less about any of this stuff, but that's the decision that they have made, is that we're all in on this, and we're all in on design excellence that's defined by this. And we're gonna give awards based on this as well. So there's some documents I sent you. It's on the AIA website if you really want to jump into this deep. Each tile includes a description of the principle and the focus topics. You can go through it, but I'll briefly talk about the 10 concepts just so you get an idea of what they are and what resources are available. So the big idea behind the project and how the approach towards sustainability informed the design, that's what this design for integration is about. You describe the project, the program, unique challenges and opportunities, how the design shaped around the project's goals and performance criteria. They have all these different programs that they're doing at National that you can dive into and just go deep. Design for equitable communities. Also, sustainability is inextricably tied to the wellness of communities. How do community members inside and outside the building benefit from the project? Were community members engaged during the design and development process? Did you have public meetings to try to make the project better, really, is what they're talking about. Other things that resources the AIA is developing around this context. This is kind of like what we did with the State Street Design Charrette. You know, how do we make the community better? Architects giving input. Maybe you have a project you want to try to interface with how it's relating to that framework we came up with. Design for ecosystems, kind of obvious. Sustainable design protects and benefits natural ecosystems and habitat in the presence of human development. Design for water, also fairly obvious because we've been doing this for a while. Conserving and improving the quality of water as a precious resource. Some resources being developed around that. Design for economy. This is providing abundance while living within our means as a fundamental challenge of sustainability. Is it affordable? How are materials used? Is it resilient? So other sorts of things that are related and resources that are available from AIA related to this principle. Design for energy, pretty much the PEUI stuff we just talked about, the DDX and the 2030 commitment leading this area of work. Design for well-being, Sustainable design supports comfort, health, and wellness for the people who inhabit or visit buildings. What are the strategies for using daylight, indoor air quality, connections to the outdoors, thermal, visual, and acoustic comfort for occupants and others inside the building? It's that whole wellness effort and other things the AIA is using as resources for that. It's overwhelming, I know. Design for resources, informed selection of materials and products to reduce product cycle environmental impacts while enhancing building performance. Resources for that. This is going to start getting standardized by UL and some of the other efforts out there to find materials of concern and things like that. Healthier materials protocol. Design for change. This is reuse, adaptability, and resilience are essential to sustainable design, which seeks to maintain and enhance usability, functionality, and value over time. So is the building going to be there and be able to be adapted, or is it an adapted building? Design for discovery. Sustainable design strategies and best practices evolve over time through documented performance and shared knowledge of lessons learned. So they're trying to extract data from successful projects and make places and buildings a place to learn about and push innovation forward. So the DDX does that by posting your stuff online. There's a project called BRIC, that building research information knowledge base. It's data for research data on the built environment and other materials and strategies, some things about aging. So all those topics, how do you combine them into one thing? They made this, the Coat folk made this thing they call the super spreadsheet. So each one of these little tabs along the bottom is one of those 10 categories, and it has links that shoot you over to all these resources, so that if you really wanted, you had a project where you thought you could hit a home run on equity, you can go to the super spreadsheet, click on that tab, do a deep dive on some of these items and really push the envelope in those areas. So I did include that in the stuff that you got emailed. The super spreadsheet should be in there. And that's what that Excel spreadsheet is all about.
And Paul, I just want to let you know, we have about 15 minutes, and I know you had wanted
We're almost there.
Q&A. Just
Almost there. So super spreadsheet. Now the Common App, let me talk about this for a few minutes. So to go with the super spreadsheet and the 10 principles, they made the Common App for Design Excellence, and it's a way to do a Reader's Digest version of how your project performs in relation to those 10 topics. So they wanted to align the awards program to support the values of the Institute embraced by this thing called the Big Move, moving towards sustainability, to simplify the process because every award submittal has a different set of criteria. So they're trying to standardize it across the Institute so that local, state, and national awards will use the same application. So you could, if you filled out a form for local award, you just submit it to national and state and no more material would be needed. And to collect, track, and make available to the membership consistent measuring of the data related to the award-winning projects. So they have the spreadsheet. It's cool. I'll show you that in a little bit. So lessons learned. When we first started doing this, me and my engineers were working for compliance. We worked till we got past Title 24, we're permittable, and we stopped. And then later I said, hey man, what's the performance on that straw bale house we did in Santa Ynez? It's like using solar to heat the slab and has hot water and every whistle we could think of. And they go, oh, that thing, it's like 25% better than code. I'm like, what? And I go, really, did you model it? Yeah, we modeled it. We only modeled it till we got compliant and then we stopped. And I'm like, well, dude, I need the full model. Like, I'm not just going, stop running the second I pass the finish line. We're trying to set the world record here. So include everything, include my thermal mass on the inside, include R54 walls, include all the other stuff. And I want to really see how it performs. And so then that mindset changed a little bit in terms of what we're doing and what I'm expecting my consultants to do for me, because we're not merely trying to cross the finish line. We're trying to measure what we're doing so that we can do better. So that was the biggest, I think. The new thing is designing zero net carbon buildings like that building in Solvang. It's pretty cool. I think that's the future. There's a lot of webinars on that from AIA California. Every building's an opportunity. If you can build a building that is big and goes from 0 to 10% better than baseline, that might have a bigger impact than doing a zero net energy home in terms of your portfolio and the impact on the earth. So every project's an opportunity to do better. Look at your firm speedometer, the DDX, and make adjustments accordingly so that your firm can do better. And small gains on large projects are equal to large gains on small projects. So do what you can, where you can. It's about being nimble, and I think small businesses are nimble. This is a project out in Goleta we're working on with Design Arc. They're doing the insides, we're doing the outsides, but Integrated Design came up with a solution where we're shading all this black of glass, replaced the storefront with dual glazed solar band 60 and shaded all the glass with solar panels. So this one's super cool, under construction right now out on Robin Hill Road in Goleta. We'll do a walkthrough on that at some point. Also, a common question is, how much extra do you charge for this incredible design? And my question back will be, how much do you charge to design a beautiful building? You know, and do you strive to just design it beautiful enough for you to get paid for your work? Or do you strive to make it as beautiful as you can? And I think the same attitude has to go to building performance. You know, don't design the lowest performing building allowed by law, which is stopping once you cross the finish line, but design the best building you can within the budget that you have, because it's going to pay benefits to the client in terms of money. Advocacy, we're advocating here for all electric buildings. We're in the hot of it right now in Santa Barbara, trying to eliminate fossil fuels from the building sector. Looks like Santa Barbara will probably pass that ordinance for new buildings to be zero net fossil fuel. And then resources available from the AIA. They have all these things. We'll get you the PowerPoint so you can just see this stuff and reference it. They have guides. They have annual reports for people providing how they did on the 2030 commitment. You know, it's really the buzz. So it's happening. Before we have questions, let me just show you the Common App real quick. So this has these cells. It's an Excel spreadsheet as well, made a little fancy, but the cool thing is it has this little spider diagram at the top. So as you fill out the cells, if you get a 0, you're in the middle. And as your project starts doing better, it starts making this weird polygon shape. So you can look quickly at a project to see how its overall performance is. It's pretty cool. So you just put the description of the project, you type in the address. Some of these things are hyperlinked to things. They all report back to the model up at the top. You add some descriptions in here for design for integration, design for equitable communities. Right now, it's really looking at what your walk score is. If you click this, it takes you to a link to a website that you just put the address in, and it gives you these 3 values. It tells you whether you're close to transit, bikeable, and walkable automatically. So it's really a place to store all the information about your project's performance in relationship to those 10 items. It gets submitted as part of your submittal for the design awards, this single document along with pictures. I judged 2 of these this year, and I learned a lot about this form, but it's pretty cool. Down here at the end, they do come down, they start looking at post-occupancy valuations and, you know, what's the lifespan of the building going to be, how much embodied carbon is in the materials that were selected. This one is something I need to learn more about myself, Design for Resources, that is kind of the cutting edge in terms of architecture and research happening right now. So with that, I think I've given you enough. I could go and probably talk about an hour about each one of those, but I think I want to take some of your questions. So I'm going to bump off a stop share and see if anyone has any.
So we actually have, so far there's 3 questions in the chat. The first was, can you explain how 2030 incorporates slash takes into consideration on-site renewable energy? And does on-site renewable energy impact your PEUI?
Yes. So I think I showed you guys on that little calculator how you can take the gas use, electric use, and on-site renewables, plug them right in there, tweak them however you want, and that definitely affects your PEUI, and it's part of the design of how you're getting to compliance. Taking all the gas out of the building, it's going to jack up your electrical load. Even if your lighting and your systems are really efficient, you're taking all the natural gas heat for hot water, space heating, dumping it on electric. But then you can offset that with renewables, which will pay for itself in 7 or 8 years. So not only is the project going to be a little bit less to run, but it's then free to run after the solar panels are paid for, because it just offsets the cost of the utility.
And then the second question was based on percent reduction, bar graph image, carbon neutral, it appears to be defined by 2030 as 95% reduction against a baseline building. And then remaining energy use comes from offsite renewable. Is that correct? And then how do on-site renewables factor into this?
Right. So you'll never get away from having no energy use. So the goal is, whether it's 95%, whether it's 80%, we're trying to crush down the energy use intensity for the building as low as we can, and then just take a matching amount of on-site renewables and match that amount. So the model might have shown 90%, 95% reduction. Not sure exactly how that gets accomplished, but I believe 80% is within the realm of reality, and offsetting that with renewables should be no problem. But the goal is to make each one just like independently zeroing out. On top of that, what the city is going to be doing is the grid power is going to be coming from largely, if not wholly, renewable source fairly soon, with the energy agreement they're making with Monterey Energy. I believe we're going to be signing up on that in the city of Santa Barbara fairly soon. San Luis Obispo signed up for that as well. So in addition to not adding load to the grid per se, but generating enough that you're using, the grid's going to get cleaner pretty soon here in Santa Barbara. So converting existing buildings over to gas, even if they have a somewhat inefficient electric load, will still be reducing the overall carbon generated by the building.
And then the third question on the chat was that you mentioned that not all your projects meet the current reduction goal. What building systems or assemblies are key factors in your projects that lead to a project meeting the reduction goal or not? Is it amount of glazing, R values, something else?
Yeah, it's the envelope, really. I mean, one time I had a hissy fit on a project. I was working with the contractor, and they said, "Oh, we can't afford to replace. We're going to do a cost savings. Just leave the old FAU in there." We were converting like a 1970s forced air unit in a residential project to like 97% efficient, highfalutin project, and I was like, "What? That's like the cornerstone of the project. Is super efficient, super efficient furnace that's going to be going in there. It's going to be great, and all this stuff." And then I said, "I'm going to show you how bad it is." So I ran the energy calc, and we had insulated the envelope so much and put good glass in and low E and a lot of other things that spending $4,000 to replace the FAU before it broke, which might be another 5 years, only improved the performance by like 2.5%. And I was like, okay, it didn't really matter. It's like 2.5% for 5 years, and then that thing breaks, we'll buy the right one and put it in there. So in my mind, of course, being attracted to all the bells and whistles, the easy thing to do is crush down the envelope and the heat loss and over insulate and insulate under the slab if you have a thermal mass, and then that thing gets stable and can maintain the temperature. Good windows, low E glass facing east and west, maybe no E glass facing south if you have the proper overhang and can coordinate it to take the extra heat gain through the sun, and you can get those things to work in your favor.
Then another one was, is there discussion or attention to reducing all of this use and square footage of buildings and conservation? Also, in light of so many now working from home, how does that change our need?
Yeah, one of these designing for economy does come to square foot per person. So on the Common App for Design Excellence that you submit for your design awards, they do ask you to provide how many square feet per person is this building. And then it's just a ratio. It's like, okay, is it 2 people living in a 5,000 square foot house? Is it 6 people living in a 1,000 square foot house, you know, or a unit per se? So economy of scale does come down to it. You look at the home trends, I think 1950s home trend was something like 1,200 square foot or 900 square foot average. And 2008 home trend was 2,400 square foot per average for the average single family house. And the household size went from like 3.8 in 1950 average to 1.2 in 2008. So square foot per person almost quadrupled. And we were wondering why people can't afford to buy houses. And it's just a simple math equation because fewer people are living in much larger spaces. And I think it's all down to economics. And we get that thing to work back. We make beautiful places for people to live where they can survive with less square footage because they're designed correctly. People will probably be able to afford them better and not make so many sacrifices to overextend themselves for that.
Then when you say super insulated, what R value does that represent on average?
Well, for sure on commercial buildings, we're retrofitting things with R30. A lot of buildings around here don't have R30 on the roof. And on a residential project, R30 I would consider that overkill for a roof, but it's pretty easy to do with isoning. If you have vaulted ceilings and some decent joist sizes, you can get up in R25, going above R19 minimum for sure, and getting something high performance on the roof, it'll make a big difference. There's also some boards that can be applied on top of the roof that Lucas Johnson had that are made out of carbon materials, some kind of wood byproduct of some kind from Germany, that instead of using foam rigid insulation, they're putting that stuff on the roof. I can't remember the name of it right now. But there's all these different things converging, trying to use less fossil fuel material and carbon intense material like foams is starting to use more organic insulation board and things like that.
Great. And I think that was the last question. I see we're at 1. I don't know if anyone else had a question.
Just unmute yourself and ask it. Yeah, Joe mentioned that project I showed on Robin Hill Road. It's a beautiful glass box that was designed in the 60s for Grumman, but it's like sitting in a parked car in a parking lot with no operable windows. And when I first went in there, if you went inside, the solution they had was they tinted the windows black with a really, really dark tint. And what it did was it acted like a solar collector and it just caught all the heat. So if you were in a perimeter office, you could feel the radiation coming off of the dark tinted glass kind of cooking you. And then the inside was cold and the outside was hot. So by using, working with Tom Hughes and J&L Glass and coming up with samples, going with Solar Band 60 and shading the glass, we're able to take all that heat gain and just like block it from coming in and overheating the envelope, and then modifying the 4-pipe system to go with we're replacing that thing with a new super efficient chiller and split systems. It still does have a gas boiler. We weren't able to replace that giant central plant with something that's all electric, but everything else is run off of electric with mini split systems everywhere. Has a separate fresh air ventilation system independent of the little mini splits that are all over the place. Every office has its own thermostat. It's going to be pretty cool.
Great. Well, thanks, Paul. The rest of the comments in the chat are just thanking you for your leadership on this and a really great presentation.
Yeah, thanks. It's a lot of stuff to cover. Later on, as we get closer to the design awards, I could do something on the Common App to help people fill that out. If anybody's interested in signing up for the 2030 commitment, maybe Ty or somebody could get a little subgroup together and I could show you guys how to do it. I know I've been participating since 2010, and it makes me get a little bit different mindset as I approach projects, and it's really improved the kind of projects that my firm's been able to do. So it's free too, which is, I'm all about that. There's one less certification or thing I have to pay for or take a bunch of classes to learn about. It's pretty intuitive once you get it down. And like I said, it's super simple. You could choose to do it yourself if you want to, or share the load with other people in your office. And it does give you an interesting insight into how you're doing.
Maybe Paul, maybe for those of us very excited about signing up, we can maybe let you or let Tara know. We can have a subgroup, maybe go through a workshop or something to kickstart or something.
Yeah, if we get some people with Zoom, it should be pretty easy. I think you could get a bunch of people who want to sign up. You can do your letter and figure your sustainability action plan out for your office on your own. I think I included a document that's lengthy about what other firms across the country are doing related to the sustainability action plan. Mm-hmm. But with Zoom, you could have your real Title 24 calculation up on the screen, and I could point at the numbers you need to put into the calculator and walk you through how the DDX data gets input. And after you do one residential project and one commercial project, you'll see that all the data you already did. I mean, we're talking to people who are like maybe from Alabama, where I'm also registered, and they don't do energy modeling or have energy calc. So those folks are like, how do you get people to pay for energy calculations anyway? And I'm like, what do you mean? We need it to get the permit. They're like, not us, you know? So because we have all that information needed, it's great for us to be able to use it to our own benefit. We don't have to have an extra service or a mechanical engineer, because basically you can't design a decent looking building and just do mandatory compliance measures unless it's a shoebox with no windows, basically. So.
Right. Well, we should definitely follow up and do that.
Amy, if I could just make a quick announcement. The general meeting on March, our first one of the year on March 11th, is going to be on sustainability, with updates from our sustainability committee on, a broader effort of what's going on, and Paul's integral part in that, the 2030 commitment. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you.
Also,
what time will
also
that
the
be?
AIA's efforts on electrification were awesome. A lot of people showed up to that hearing and testified at the hearing and saw what the gas company was up to. And it's really important that we stay in front of that and support the city council trying to do the right thing for our city. You know, we don't want them to continue on the few number of brand new projects, putting in obsolete infrastructure that's going to be in place for a long time. Buildings are going to start coming off of using natural gas. They're going to use natural gas for things like driving trucks and probably flying aircraft at some point. But we certainly don't need it to make hot water or heat the space in buildings. You might need it for cooking food, and I'm okay with a waiver for restaurants if they need to use gas for whatever kind of food they're preparing, or for pool heaters if that's the only way to heat jacuzzis.